There still are a good number of people who would like to transition to barefoot or minimally shod running or just general lifestyles. And I think back to a quote from Eric Orton's book, The Cool Impossible, where he flat out states relative to runners that most people have absolutely no idea what they're doing. Eric Orton, O-R-T-O-N, was nicknamed the Hawk in the best-selling book from 2009, Born to Run. Eric is considered one of the top running coaches in the world. And I think that he's mostly right. Most of us don't really have much of a clue what we're doing. Fortunately, I took most of the information from Born to Run to heart and really experimented with it for a long time. So it's been over 9 years since I transitioned into minimalist and barefoot running. My most recent 100-mile race was just 3 weeks ago, the Cloud Splitter in Virginia on High Knob Mountain. It's one of the tougher ones around, nearly 25,000 feet of climbing and highly technical most of the way. So only 23 of us finished it, and I was, I believe, the first person to ever run it all the way through in Huarache style sandals. A personal goal that most people don't care about, but it was important to me to do it the way the Tarahumara would have done it. The Raramuri, the Indians from the Copper Canyons of Mexico, which is really what Born to Run was all about. Oftentimes when I'm out running for hours barefoot in a college arena or running a really tough ultra marathon in Huarache style sandals with no socks, people think, wow, you must have really rugged skin with calluses. And in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. Really no calluses. The skin is just probably like everybody else's. It's pretty soft. Now my feet have changed shape. I've got less arch in the right foot than the left, but I've got more arch now, and the midfoot is much thicker than it used to be. So I'm far more interested in attempting to inspire people to make positive changes than in boasting about accomplishments. And I'm not a fast runner, so most people look at my race results and say, gosh, he's not even fast, and that's true. What I work on the most is injury-free running and really enjoying my time running. In the last 8.5 years or so, I've gotten close to 60 ultra marathons run. And during this last 8 years, my budget for chiropractors, orthopedists, $0, not a single penny. So obviously I hope to keep that record intact, even though I'm pursuing harder and longer courses. So no, I do not have genetically gifted feet. They used to be just about as messed up as most people's feet. Point being, I've learned a few things along the way, and hope to share as much of that as possible with you. Now, a little bit of history to keep things in context. I am 57 now. I was the oldest finisher at the Cloud Splitter race, and not in last place either. So I did okay. I beat the cutoff time by over 3 hours. But before I found the book Born to Run, I had had cancer at age 42. I was overweight. I had flat feet, and I frequently rolled my ankles, even on flat, smooth terrain. I had a bad appendix. I had fuzzy vision. I had sky-high cholesterol. I had general fatigue. I was a train wreck in progress. So after reading Born to Run, the first change I made was to get some super lightweight minimalist cross-country flats and some Vibram 5-finger zero drop minimalist shoes. And I did some barefoot training along with those as I slowly worked my way out of the overbuilt shoes I now think of as army boots. But I used to wear the typical shoes for over-pronators. We're supposed to pronate our feet to a moderate degree. But I had the arch supports in the heavy, overbuilt, overpadded running shoes. It was ridiculous. Now, I ended up doing the transition a little bit too fast, in part because I also took on the all plant-based diet that I learned a lot about from Born to Run, and that really increased my energy and drive, and I overtrained for a first 50K, which did result in a stress fracture to my right ankle. So that was the last injury. That'll be going on 9 years ago in the spring. And that was my fault. I learned a lot from it. And prior to all of this, I had an accident out in the yard, messing around on a log, and I could not believe how easily my tibia bone snapped. I had a fracture in the same right ankle as the one where I developed the stress fracture later on. And so I knew that I had an issue with weak ankles and weak feet. And so Born to Run ended up being the beginning of a lot of positive changes. And one of the big experiments is in fact less more relative to footwear. And I would say absolutely 100%, the very least you have on your feet for any given task, the better. So backing up just a bit, the very early stages of the transition meant going out a little bit in my old heavy shoes, and then maybe taking them off and doing a few hundred feet or a quarter mile in either completely barefoot or in the more minimalist shoes of whatever type, and then slowly rotating that to where eventually the old heavy pronator shoe was never worn again after a matter of a few weeks. And I was doing more pure barefoot time and pretty much exclusively minimal shoes after that. And then during that first several months, I got my first pair of 4mm Huarache style sandals, which really helped me take it quickly to the next level. The thin kit sandals that I was wearing right away, first run, they were teaching me to do an even better job of picking up my feet with every single stride. Because if you didn't, that little bit of rubber would kind of roll underfoot and grab the grass or the blacktop or the dirt and kind of remind you, hey, this isn't going to work. You've got to pick up your foot every time. Working from the core strength, pick up the feet, lean forward from the ankles, let gravity take you. That, of course, is a bit oversimplified. I highly recommend the book Chi, C-H-I, Chi Running by Danny Dreyer, or Ken Bob Saxton's Barefoot Running book. In those books, you will learn what to do with every other part of your body to become the most efficient runner possible. And all of that comes into play if you really want to reduce your risk of injury. One of the things I learned early on relative to going completely barefoot was that I need to be more careful about where I did that. I once had to dig a clear glass splinter out of my foot. That scared me. So I almost always will wear at least a thin Huarache style sandal if I'm anywhere near public roads, say on a bike trail. However, some great solutions for safely running completely barefoot. We have a huge soccer complex nearby. If I run around all 3 of the blocks in the grass where they have this massive soccer complex, it's a mile or better. And they have smooth blacktop roads all the way around, so long as there's not sharp, crushed gravel laying on top of that road, it makes a phenomenal running surface. So if you really want to get the grass underfoot, find a park that's really clean, free of glass. Soccer fields tend to be great for that. Another fantastic solution has been going to a local college arena and running on the hard rubber indoor track. It's well worn. It's absolutely perfect for barefoot running because it's so smooth and hard. And there's also a polished concrete quarter-mile concourse that runs around the arena. I can run that for hours. And of course, the arena stairs are fantastic for hill training, really working the body hard, completely barefoot. In fact, with winter on the way, I will very soon be going back to the indoor pure barefoot running, which is a fantastic annual tune-up on my running form and an opportunity to strengthen my feet, and then even get back to doing some more core body work, push-ups and so forth. This will be my 7th winter of running hundreds of miles indoor in the college arena. It's been fantastic. This was how I kept the cold and flu away before my first 100-mile race. That was the first year that I ran the C&O Canal 100-miler in late April. To be ready for a 100-miler that early in the year required me to put some serious mileage on during the winter. Another thing that I did early in the learning curve, which was a long and winding road, was spend a lot of time pure barefoot at home, inside, in the yard when possible. And what will very likely happen is pain becomes a great teacher. You're probably going to bash your toes into chair legs, table supports, appliances, and so on and so forth. This teaches awareness. And as Eric Orton says, athleticism is all about awareness. You could even take that and say that human existence, the joy of life, it all comes down to a deeper awareness. One of the other most important things you can consider doing is getting a stand-up desk if you spend a lot of time at a computer or just a desk in general. So therefore you'll be sitting less. The idea is to spend as much time supporting your core with your own 2 feet versus sitting. Sitting gets our body muscles way out of balance. And another book that I gotta recommend is Pete Agaskew's book called Pain Free, where he teaches you how to eliminate pain from all parts of the body. And he teaches what he calls E-sizes, exercises, drills, that you can easily learn from his book and do yourself. I've been a self-coached runner all the way, learning from many experts, but via YouTube videos and reading books. I haven't had a paid coach. Speaking of videos, here on my channel is a video called Barefoot Training Ideas for Runners. There's a more recent video on rebounding, and an even more recent video on a product called the Bob. I'd recommend you watch all those. There's a recent video I did, a couple of them, on running blister-free ultra marathons. And in those videos, I talk about using lubricant on the skin, specifically for your feet and your footwear. I tend to use toe socks or the thinnest socks I can find. And I usually use Body Glide because it's all plant-based. Whatever you rub into your skin can get into your bloodstream. So I try to be very careful with what I apply to the skin. But for minimalist running shoes, for me that's usually sandals, I will apply Body Glide or something similar to the insides of all the lacing where it might contact my skin, especially on a new sandal. And I will also apply, oftentimes, especially before a longer run, a generous application of Body Glide to the entire foot. Some other thoughts on the early transition, or even in the later transition to barefoot and minimalist. Top of the foot pain is pretty common, and as well as getting maybe blisters or especially calluses on the bottoms of the feet. You're probably going to go through a process where the midfoot area will become more muscular and thicker. The arch might change shape, and you're basically you're changing the shape of your foot, and that affects the rest of your body. As you go through this process, you're oftentimes taking a risk, dancing on that fine line between growth, otherwise known as productive discomfort, which are positive things, and an injury, which is obviously a negative, a setback, probably an expense. It's going to become up to you becoming an expert at your own personal body sensing, body awareness. One of the things I learned from having the stress fracture on the right side of my right ankle in the fibia was that if I regularly would lift my foot off the ground, relax it, and shake it out, I could sense when it was time to start running again by feeling the pain becoming less and less and less through that process. Some other tips that I use to rehab that stress fracture could come in handy for you in terms of strengthening your or non-injured feet for barefoot running. I did a lot of swimming and some biking, but specific to the pool work, I would walk across the pool and usually backward. The reason for walking backwards is Danny Dreyer teaches either on his website or in his book, Chi Running, that it's virtually impossible to have bad body posture, bad body form when you're running backwards. If you go backwards, you're going to find your chest comes up, your core straightens up, the crown of your head kind of rises up to the sky, and your elbows go backwards as you move. Basically, it's a good way to set your body up to run forwards. Briefly run backwards, even if you're not in the pool, and then kind of notice what your body posture is. And then from there, you can stop, lean forward just a little bit from your ankles, and let gravity get you going. So if you jump into this and really get into this learning curve, it's fun and you'll learn a lot. One of the things you'll probably learn is, like a mechanic can read a vehicle's tires and then very possibly diagnose an underlying problem from uneven wear patterns. You can do that with your feet, with your shoes. You can study the wear patterns on your sandals or shoes and very likely determine the flaws in your form or the flaws in your stride. Maybe you're understriding or overstriding. You can figure this stuff out from looking at your sandals or your shoes. And what I've learned is that by attempting to make the wear pattern happen mid-foot, in the middle of the sandal, with minimal wear on the heel, that has brought the best results. Now, if you do a lot of walking in your shoes, walking is a light heel strike. So you're probably going to have some heel pattern wear. That does not mean that you're overstriding and heel striking when you run. And again, running pure barefoot on the hardest, smoothest possible surface is going to give you the best safe feedback for kind of perfecting that stride and learning to run as light, smooth, and easy as possible. Knees are always bent. Going downhill, they're bent even more. Now, I've already shared with you the fact that I'm saving a lot of money by not needing chiropractors or orthopedists, and by running in zero drop, lightweight, minimalist Huarache sandals that are not very expensive and can go thousands of miles, I'm saving a bloody fortune on shoes. Of course, my hope is that even into my 80s or longer, I'll still be doing distance running and with my original equipment, original ankles, original knees, original hips. That's where the tens of thousands of dollars could be saved, as well as adding decades of quality lifespan. Now, I can't talk about all of the great things that happen by running barefoot or in sandals without also mentioning the negatives. The last weekend of September, I ran a really hot, hilly, fairly technical 50K trail race, and I over-tightened the lacing on my left sandal. And after about 10 miles, I realized I had rubbed my skin raw and it was bleeding. So all I had to do was loosen that strap back up, let that sandal flop around like it needs to, and it was fine. And fortunately, the wound healed because 2 weekends later, I was in the mountains in Virginia running my hardest ever 100-mile race. Into the first night run of that race involved running into the darkness twice. I think I was getting a little bit too confident on really extraordinarily rough mountain terrain. There were a lot of loose stones and boulders. At one point, I'm not really sure what happened. All I know is there was a loose rock. It rolled, my foot rolled. Somehow a rock or something got underneath my pinky toe, ripped a gash underneath it, and into the inside between the two smallest toes. It was cold. I was not quite sure how bad the injury was. I thought maybe I stretched it so far I tore a tendon or perhaps even broke a bone. I was grateful just to see a little bit of blood puddling on my sandal. So then I knew it was safe. I shook that foot out, was able to move on it. You know, it slowed me down for several hours, but I was able to finish that race. And did I get mad at the sandals? No. Did I get mad at the trail? No. The trail taught me I was going too fast for the conditions. Unassured, clear distance, I guess. So when you kick that bar stool or the leg of a chair, or you get a rock, or you step under on a painful rock on a trail without any protection under your foot, it doesn't pay to get upset with the bar stool or the chair or the rock. Learn the simple lesson. Just learn from the discomfort what you're supposed to be learning. At a 100-mile trail race a few years ago, the whole course was basically flat with lots of small round stones all over it. And into the first night, it was cold, I was having trouble staying awake, and I kept getting these little rocks between the outsole of my sandal and the bottom of my foot. And rather than getting ticked off about it, I completely focused on how I needed to change up my stride to not kick up any rocks onto the top part of my sandal, and that solved the problem. The rocks were trying to teach me to be a more efficient runner. I didn't need gaiters, I didn't need bigger shoes or thicker socks or anything else. Okay, so I said there were 3 races that were bloody recently. The third one was just this past weekend. There were 7 loops that we had to run to make 50K. It was on Mount Airy in Cincinnati, a really wonky course with lots of angles and rocks and roots. It just really uneven terrain. Started off with a lot of rain, a lot of mud, and it was just a tough one. I had to watch every step for most of the course. And on that 7th loop, when it had finally gotten sunny and drier, I didn't pick up my right foot properly. My toenail got hung up on something, a rock or a root, and I wasn't sure if maybe I was going to lose that toenail. It hurt badly, and I knew not to get mad at the rock or the root. It was entirely my fault. I didn't pick up my foot. I was getting worried about how slow I was going, and I got sloppy. So pain is a very effective teacher. And fortunately, again, it was merely a flesh wound. It bled for, I don't know, a couple hours, but the toenail has not turned black. It was an extremely minor nuisance. So yeah, is it worth a stubbed toe every once in a great while? It had been years of running ultra marathons, and I'd never cut my toe like that until a few weeks ago. So being injury-free for over 8 years of steady ultra running, if I screw up and stub my toe a few times, that's a pretty good trade-off. For this video, I do not want to go too far into the food fight or the nutritional weeds, as they say. But I absolutely cannot emphasize enough how important it is if you're really going to get into endurance. They're really pushing it. You should think about having a diet with the absolute maximum amount of antioxidants. You're going to have oxidative stress. You need to heal it as quickly as possible with a nutritionally complete diet with the least amount of dis-ease promoting content. You also want the diet that is the absolute best at minimizing inflammation. You want an anti-inflammatory diet, and the ideal for that, hands down, is a whole foods, minimally processed, all plant-sourced diet. Since I've combined the minimalist running style and minimalist shoes with the anti-inflammatory diet, it's been years since I've taken an ibuprofen or an aspirin or any kind of anti-inflammatory after a race. I run a 100-mile race. I don't take anything for it. That's part of, in my opinion, part of the awareness. Your body's sending you signals. You learn something from it. You're patient. You let it heal. Personally, I think that all ties together with the minimalist mindset and the whole theme of natural motion. Another topic I guess I really need to include in this is just how much fun it can be being one of the only or the only barefoot, sandal-clad runners at any race, especially a really hard 100-mile ultramarathon through the mountains. I can never forget all of the comments at the Superior 100. I ran that entire race in one pair of sandals, no socks, 103 plus miles, and the comments were just kind of never ending. The way the race was laid out with multiple distances, lots of different runners, a big race. The comments sort of ranged from, holy cow, wow, that's just badass. You must just be, so tough or whatever, which is really not true at all. I do this to avoid injuries. It's really, in a sense, it's a wimpy thing to do. And the other response tended to be, holy crap, dude, you're freaking crazy. You're going to hurt yourself. You need some shoes. But what I've found that generally after every 100-mile race, it's very rare to have even a scratch, much less a scab or any blood. those 3 incidents recently where I had some relatively minor blood, were anomalies. And I guess I also feel obligated to say that after 14 finishes at the 100-mile distance, plus 4 DNFs did not finish races, where each of those I went about 100K to 99 miles for those. They were pretty extreme efforts, even at the failed races. But after all 18 of those races, never a single blister. And typically after a 100-mile race, everybody takes off their shoes, and very frequently the runners with shoes, especially the heavier shoes and thick socks, they tended to count how many blisters and how big they are. It looks really painful, but yet people look at me like I'm nuts for not wearing those shoes and getting those blisters. There was a recent 100-mile race where I experimented with a pair of sandals from a company out of Spain. Minimalist Sandals was the brand. I don't think they're selling sandals anymore, but the toe post was soft and much thicker than the ones I'm used to. And I ended up getting kind of a callus developing between the big toes on just one foot. Never felt it. It wasn't a blister like I think of a blister. So it was sort of a blood blister. I just consider that a callus. The only time I've lost one small toenail was from doing a winter, very cold 50K trail race wearing minimalist shoes that were approximately a half size too small. So if you can get an incredible amount of miles out of one pair of sandals, avoid spending even a single dollar with the chiropractor or the orthopedist, that leaves more money that you could potentially spend on other gear or races. And that has allowed me to run at least one ultramarathon every month this year so far, including 5 100-mile races. And there are people doing way more than that. But for me, that was huge. During 2017 and 2018, I ramped up both of those years doing 11 ultramarathons per year. And of course, that's not even counting training runs where I've gone 50K or even 50 miles multiple times. If by chance you're interested in kind of getting into that lunatic fringe of running mountainous, really rough, technical ultras that go through the night, I highly recommend a quality waist belt lamp. And you can wear a headlamp with it. The headlamp will help your light follow your vision, your head in motion, but the waist belt will do a fantastic job of lighting up the ground right in front of you to minimize your risk of catching a rock or a root or stepping in a hole. I'm sure I'm forgetting quite a few things. I think the last thing to say is that should you decide to embark on this adventure, I hope it's fun, and I hope that you completely take responsibility for anything good or bad that happens. If you get hurt, don't blame me, don't blame the shoes, don't blame the trail or the rocks or the roots or the mud. Take responsibility for it.